All right, well, my clock is showing noon, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome. I'm Angie Pilgrim, the Director of Community Impact for the St. Croix Valley Foundation, and it's really good to see you all. On behalf of the St. Croix Valley Foundation and our longtime partner and event sponsor, First State Bank and Trust, I am delighted to welcome you to the launch of this year's Conversations of the Valley, our community forum that's been inspiring thought leaders since 2004. The mission of the St. Croix Valley Foundation is to enhance the quality of life in the Valley by supporting charitable giving, connecting people and programs, and encouraging collaboration. Today's event is one way we encourage collaboration, bringing you all, individuals and organizations, together to learn and to imagine how we might respond to both current and emerging issues. The theme of this year's Conversations of the Valley series is regional resiliency. There's no question that the last 2.5 years have tested resiliency in previously unimaginable ways, yet we all worked to meet those challenges head on. And I'm guessing over the past few months, we have all also taken some time to reflect on what was learned so that when faced with future unknowns, we'll be stronger and better prepared. We asked a few of our local community leaders, what evidence of resiliency do you see right here in the St. Croix Valley? Let's hear what they had to say.
I'm Tracy Maki, CEO at Valley Outreach.
I'm Snyder. I'm the Public Health Director and Health Officer for Pierce County, Wisconsin.
Hello, I'm Christine Moeller with the Northwest Alliance Community Foundation. Our region encompasses Burnett County and Northern Polk County.
Hi, I'm Marty Harding. I'm on the board of Northwoods and Waters of the St. Croix Heritage Area, a watershed-wide organization.
When I'm asked what evidence I see of resilience in the St. Croix Valley, I respond that we see resilience every day. It is the husband caring for his wife after a stroke, neither fully employed, her because she cannot work, and him because he's caring for her.
These strong and trusted partnerships that we have in our community are really what sustain us even through the toughest of times.
It's hard to generalize about resilience within an area this large. We have 8,000 square miles in our watershed, and within our boundaries are 4 sovereign Anishinaabe nations, 2 states, 18 counties, and over 120 communities. It is richly and beautifully diverse in all of its cultures, histories, and natural resources.
As we look at our community and evaluate its resiliency during and following the pandemic, I'd like to focus on 2 areas, our businesses and our human services.
Resilience is the children growing up much too quickly and acting as interpreters for their parents when they come in here for services.
Pierce County Public Health won a competitive grant to really help improve the system that serves children who have experienced trauma and support their development. And we won in January of 2020, and then the pandemic hit. But then partners stood up and said, we will help you implement this.
I think there are 3 related factors that are present in resilient communities that make these places able to bend but not break. The commitment of its people, the level of communication between people and organizations, and the connectedness people feel to each other and the place that they live.
We live in a very rural community, and our business owners are our neighbors. Our residents saw their role and their need to support their friends during this time. It was that mutual commitment that helped with the resiliency and success for our businesses now to be back to normal, and in many cases better than normal.
They come to us because they want to keep moving forward. They're seeking and attempting to build resilience, and they'd like to get to a more stable place. And believe me, they would much prefer to not walk in here, but they need to.
The United Way of St. Croix Valley, Family Resource Center, St. Croix Therapy, and UW Extension stepped up to help public health implement this grant to support children in a time where we just weren't able to do it.
The commitment of our people in the political arena, in volunteerism, in financial giving, in leadership is so inspiring. The communication channels we now have available to us are becoming more effective and more accessible. The pandemic made us all adept at Zoom, for instance, and this tool makes it possible for us to address community challenges and amplify solutions much more quickly.
When we look at our human services, our schools looked at things from a different perspective than many. They wanted to keep their students in session longer. This has proved advantageous to the students as they've now begun in-person classes again. Our clinics and our hospitals responded well to the community's needs, knowing that they needed to do everything they could in order to support the people here. Local food shelves continued serving against all odds, with many experiencing increased numbers served.
So in our opinion and experience, it takes strength to ask for help and to think ahead. And that is all about resilience. We try to make it as easy as possible for people to get what they need.
The sense of connectedness people feel for their communities, or the lack of it, is being addressed by organizations throughout the watershed. The last Conversations of the Valley series is a great example. It focused on a sense of place and how communities thrive when they intentionally create a place where everyone is welcomed and valued.
We feel that our area has rebounded well since the pandemic, and this has been enabled by our joint community support. Thank you.
We're here because everybody needs help sometimes, and we're here to help create resilience in our communities.
As I travel around the watershed, I see signs of resilience in communities, and I see communities that are really struggling. Assets and resilience are not evenly spread, but I also see a desire from individuals, organizations, and communities around the watershed to reach beyond their own boundaries to ensure that their neighboring communities have what they need. This sense of regionalism, this desire to unite rather than to divide, this knowledge that we're all in this together is becoming more powerful. And as we work together, we'll all become more resilient. And this gives me hope.
Thanks for previewing that. And a huge thank you to these important partners, AZ, Chris, Marty, and Tracy, for sharing those thoughts. So this COV season, I look forward to, alongside you, exploring what we have learned about community resiliency and understanding what issues may still require our region's attention. Ultimately, it is our hope that this 4-part series will raise awareness, spark ideas, and help communities face the future with, like Marty said, hope and optimism. Before I introduce our speaker, 2 quick reminders. To keep things running smoothly, we have muted all participants. And we will have some time at the end for questions, so please type any questions you may have for our speaker into the chat box, which can be accessed at the bottom of your screen. And now I am pleased to introduce Professor Stephen Deller. Professor Deller joined the University of Wisconsin-Madison faculty in 1993. He is a professor in the Department of Agriculture and Applied Economics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a Community Economic Development Specialist with the UW-Madison Division of Extension. His work is in the broad area of community economic development with a focus on smaller communities and rural areas. He co-authored the textbook, Community Economics, Linking Theory and Practices, and has co-edited 5 other books, each focusing on community, rural, and regional economic development. Professor Deller's 30-plus page CV lists numerous awards, grants, publications, articles, books, etc. And I am so honored to welcome him here today. Thank you, Professor Deller, and I now turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And let me get the presentation set up here. And you should be seeing a title slide, What Makes for a Resilient Community. And I want to thank you for allowing me to share with you some of the insights that we've gathered over years of kind of studying the dynamics of particularly smaller communities, more rural communities, but a lot of the lessons learned also apply to larger places, okay? So, and one of the things that I really appreciated the introductory video, and I didn't catch her name, but the lady that had the 3 crane, the paintings of the 3 cranes in the background, some of the things that she mentioned, like everyone is welcomed and valued, that, we're coming together as a region. A lot of the comments that I was scribbling them down because they're going to be very consistent with some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. Okay. So let me start off by saying that I've been looking at this issue of resiliency and stability for a number of years now, and primarily with a colleague, Phil Watson, who's at University of Idaho. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you is kind of the insights that we've gotten from a lot of this research. And I'm not going to cover these particular studies. You don't need to worry about that. This is the only thing I'm going to share with you from kind of those more academic studies. And this is to kind of give you an idea of how, as an economist, I think about resiliency. Okay. And take, for example, you've got a community that's growing along quite nicely, and then some economic shock hits. This could be the Great Recession, which is what we kind of studied a lot. Phil and I studied a lot. This could be something like a natural disaster, like a hurricane, or a wildfire, or a major employer that goes out, that shuts down. And there's a couple of things here that we really want to try to look at. One is, how hard is the economy impacted by the shock? How big is that drop down, if you will? Some communities, through the Great Recession, for example, there are some places that were hit really, really hard by the Great Recession, but there are other places not so much. Madison, where I'm at right now, for example, really wasn't hit that hard by the Great Recession. Why? What is it about the places that were hit really hard compared to the places that were not hit very hard? What can we learn from that? How fast does the economy recover from the shock? When you talk to an economist and you talk about resiliency, that's kind of what comes to mind, is how fast you can come back from that shock. Some places, again, using the Great Recession as an example, there are some places that kind of rebounded pretty quickly. There are other places that have yet to recover. You look at rural Wisconsin, lots of areas in rural Wisconsin never got back before the Great Recession levels, and then COVID hit. Okay, why is that? Why are some places bouncing back and other places not? And how can that help us inform policy? Does the economy come back to where it was before the shock? Okay, does the economy actually come back stronger? Madison, for example, actually came back stronger after the Great Recession. Why is that? So this is kind of the way that we thought about these questions in terms of these academic studies. And what I'm going to share with you is some of the insights that we got from that. But the problem is, or the issue is that everything matters. Okay. When you look at what makes a community a vibrant community, it's not just one or two magic bullets. It's a multitude of factions. It's a multitude of things coming together. And indeed, in the montage introduction, a lot of those things were touched on. It wasn't just one thing. It was lots of little things. Now, the problem that we have is that when we're studying rural communities or smaller communities and everything matters, it's really hard to get your head around it. So this is a systems thinking approach that was developed by Neil Flora, who's a rural sociologist at Iowa State University. And this is actually, I think, a pretty good way of thinking about it. Okay, so I want to use this framework to kind of lay out all the different things that are important to making for a resilient community. The idea here is, what assets are available to the community? What do you have strengths in? And how can you build on those? Okay, what are some potential deficits that we need to think about? We need to make some investments in order to kind of complete the complexity of the puzzle, if you will. Now, what we're aiming for is really vibrant communities. Now, what do we mean by vibrant communities? Well, resilient, okay? And I didn't add that for this particular presentation. This is something that is really a goal for many economic growth and development policies, is that we want to build a community, we want to build a regional economy that is able to absorb shocks, okay, that drop down, the impact of the shock. We want to minimize those. And then we want to be able to maximize our ability to bounce back, okay, the resiliency. Okay. We want entrepreneurial communities. Now, a lot of times when people hear the word entrepreneurial, they think of business owners. They think of people starting businesses. That's only one part of it. You can think in terms of like social entrepreneurship. This could be nonprofits, food banks, nonprofit childcare centers, Main Street programs, for example, that can actually think about how can we do something different? How can we do something that is a little innovative and move the community forward? All of the research says the engine of economic growth is innovation. Okay. Innovation is essentially new products, new ways of doing things. Okay. How many of you have heard the phrase, and I'm not expecting, is the notion of Schumpeter's creative destruction? Okay, that new ideas, new products, new services push out old ones. That creative destruction is the engine of economic growth. Okay, and indeed, if you think about innovation and entrepreneurship together, a nice way of thinking about it is innovation is from things people do, ideas that people come up with, products that people come up with. Entrepreneurship is the ability to implement those, to bring those ideas to market, to bring those ideas into the community and actually have the community become more resilient and more vibrant. Forward-looking, not backward-looking. This is one of the nodes that you'll notice here is cultural capital. It's really kind of the attitude of the community. Is the community kind of, is the attitude of the community, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? That's really vitally important. And as an economist, I struggle with that, okay? Because it's something that is, it's really in the realm of the social dimensions and the cultural dimensions of the community, but that's something that's in the background that is always there. Okay, so let's go around and look at some of these different capitals just quickly. Human capital. A lot of times when we think about human capital, we think about education. We think about K-12. We think about access to the technical schools. We think of access to the universities. We think about formal education. It's more subtle than that. Okay, problem solving abilities and critical thinking is vital. When I was finishing up my graduate work at the University of Illinois, and I'm not going to say how many years ago it was, the university was concerned that the undergraduate program was becoming too tech-oriented and that the humanities were kind of being pushed to the side. And they were concerned about that. So what they did is they did an extensive series of interviews and focus groups with the business community around Illinois. And what they found is what the business community wanted is they wanted people that had problem solving skills. They wanted people that had critical thinking skills. They wanted people that could work independently, almost in an entrepreneurial sense, but yet be effective as part of a team. The technical skills they can pick up as they go along. That was a real eye-opener to the University of Illinois, and I think it's really important how we think about what education should be. It's not just technical skills for labor that fits into the local economy, but it's really kind of problem solving and critical thinking. Okay, and this isn't just in terms of labor, a cog in the engine of the economy, but this also talks about community leadership, political leadership. It kind of cuts across the board here. Okay, financial capital. We all wish that if we decided that we wanted to start a business, or we wanted to buy a house, or we wanted to send our children off to university, that we had enough cash on hand that we could do that. That's not the case. Everybody needs access to finance. You're buying a house, you're going to school, you're trying to start a business, or you're buying a new car. You got to have access to financial capital. This is vital. We're doing some work right now on what's referred to as banking deserts. This is where it's not just the lack of access to financial institutions, but it's the attitude of the bankers. We're doing a series of workshops with the community in north central Wisconsin. I won't tell you the name of it, but when we were talking about, what are the assets of the community, I kind of said, well, I noticed that you've got a branch of a regional bank here. Why aren't they at the table? And they said, well, we're trying to recruit another bank to come in. What they were essentially saying is that local bank really wasn't an active partner. That's a warning sign. So it's not only access to the money, but it's the access to the financial institutions being a member of and a proactive member of community efforts. Okay, built capital. There we're oftentimes thinking about things like roads and bridges, sewer systems, water treatment systems, things like that. I just visited my daughter who lives down in New Orleans. I will never complain about the roads in Wisconsin ever again. It's atrocious, the road conditions down there. They're so bad that it's hindering the ability of New Orleans to actually grow and prosper. It's that simple. The one that is kind of in the forefront right now is broadband. How many of you are working in communities or are living in communities where broadband is a big issue? Okay, we're spending a lot of time talking about broadband, but the conversation is actually maturing. It's moving beyond simply having the fiber optics or the physical infrastructure, but it's also now, okay, once we get it, how do we make sure that people are able to take advantage of it? How do we make sure that people are able to afford subscription rates? So we need to think about kind of the build capital, okay? Natural capital. I think this is really important for the St. Croix Valley because you're blessed with some really high natural amenities. When you look at rural America, there are some parts of rural America that are really lagging behind and they're struggling. There are other parts of rural America that are doing very well. Thank you very much. And one of the big factors there is access to natural amenities, natural capital. The way that we can think about it here is kind of the historical way of thinking about natural capital is you plan on it, you dig it out of the ground, or you cut it down. Okay, very extractive. We're shifting as a society to what's called non-extractive uses. This is recreation, tourism, scenic beauty. How many of you remember the frac sand mining gold rush that occurred a few years ago? Okay, lots of conflict in the Driftless area. And it was essentially non-extractive uses, natural amenities, wildlife, scenic beauty, versus let's dig up the sand. Okay, lots of conflict within communities over how to deal with that. What's happened to the frac sand mining industry? It went bust. Whenever you have kind of a gold rush mentality, something's not right. Okay, so that's kind of a lesson learned from there. Social capital. Oh, I could spend all day talking about notions of social capital. But what we mean when we talk about social capital is the connections amongst people and organizations. Specifically, it's the network of connections that enables the flow of information. You ever heard the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know? This is what we're getting at. This is essentially what is the network of people that you belong to, that you can tap into when it comes to problem solving. If you're thinking of starting a new business, who do you think will be more successful? Someone who's kind of isolated and not well connected, or someone that has a pretty wide network and kind of tap into and extract information? Okay, social capital is extremely important. Now, there's two types of social capital here. And the research is suggesting that there's a difference between these two, and it really matters. One is what's called bonding social capital. This is the kind of the ties that are close and build community cohesion. Think of it this way. If you belong to a church or a religious organization, that's kind of inward-looking network of people that you're familiar with. A social club, like the Lions Club or some kind of sports organization that you belong to, okay? Those are things that kind of tie people together, and those are extremely important. But we're finding that bridging social capital, that involves the ability to kind of work across organizations. This group, for example, is an example of bridging social capital. You're looking outside of your immediate network to find out, well, how are they approaching it over there? What are they doing that we can learn from? Okay, that notion of bridging social capital is extremely important. This is, if you're interested in more on this, there's a project out of Iowa State University called the Small Iowa Town Project. And they've been tracking small rural communities, population 5,000 to 10,000, something like that in Iowa for over 30 years. And they're really coming down to identifying some of the characteristics of some of these Iowa towns that are doing quite well, thank you very much, and those that are struggling. And a lot of it comes down to these notions of bridging and bonding social capital. The one comment from the woman in the introductory comments, everyone is welcome and valued. That's a notion of bridging social capital. If you have new people coming into the community, are they welcomed? Are they encouraged to get involved? And I'm not talking about well, we have a welcome wagon program where we give them a basket of fruit. Not that. They're actively encouraged to get involved in the community. We actively encourage learning their perspectives from wherever they came from. Okay. And we welcome that. That's extremely important. If the community has the attitude of, well, you're not from here, so you don't really understand, that can be the kiss of death. Okay. And this is, again, kind of a cultural phenomenon. Cultural, how we know the world, how my wife teaches sociology. And whenever she hears me talk about culture, she always says I'm getting it wrong. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because this is kind of that, the receptiveness to outside ideas, the receptiveness to new people coming into the community. If there's, say, an influx of Latino people into the community, are they embraced? Are they celebrated? Are those small businesses that they're forming welcomed into the local business organizations? That's part of the culture of the community. Again, it's the glass half full or it's the glass half empty. Okay. Are they constantly going, well, back in my day, this is the way we did it, or are they looking forward? Okay. Political capital. This is kind of a notion two ways here. One of the things that is we're losing political capital with all the partisan bickering that's going on. We saw it with the Speaker of the House elections, a week ago. I'm seeing it in Madison state government. The partisan divides are we're losing political capital. I'm afraid that those kind of partisan divides are going to filter down to local communities. And if it does, it's going to do a tremendous amount of damage. Political capital essentially says, look, we may not agree. There's a lot of things we don't agree on, and we've agreed to disagree, but what can we work on together that we can't agree on? Okay, that's a form of political capital. We're putting our individual differences aside and we're working together. An example, I was at the University of Maine before I came to Wisconsin, and there are a couple of people in the department that really personally did not like each other. Who can imagine academics not liking each other? But when it came to the department, in faculty meetings, they will put their personal differences aside and work together for the betterment of the department and the betterment of the university. And then they go back to not liking each other. But their ability to do that was just impressed the hell out of me. And we're losing that ability to do that. The other thing in here is the networks, the outside networks to higher units of government. For example, if your community is running into a problem, do you have qualms of calling your state senator, or your state representative, or your congressional representative, or your U.S. senator and saying, we need help? Okay. Are you connecting out and reaching out like that? Okay. Based on the research on economic growth, stability, and resilience, suggests that all of these community capitals matter. But there are two that stand out. Okay. One is economic diversity. And again, all those studies that I was doing with Phil Watson, one of the things that kept coming up again and again and again is how diversified is your local economy? Now, when we think about that, oftentimes we think, in terms of we have kind of an even distribution of employment across a lot of different industries. Okay, that's one way of thinking about it. But economic diversity is also kind of a cultural dimension. When you look at this literature and you're looking in more of large urban places, metropolitan areas, places that have a greater ethnic diversity tend to be more resilient and more dynamic than places that are more homogeneous, if you will, from an ethnic perspective. I think that same thing plays out here. Okay, and it plays out to kind of that insights is that, say you've got a growing Latino population, you got a growing Hmong population, are they welcomed into the community? Okay, so the idea here is that we want to have a diversified economy. Okay, we don't want to become overly dependent on a particular set of industries. We don't want to do that. The other is social capital. Okay, and this is that Iowa small town project type work. Social capital is extremely important. And I think that this type of network that we're right now, what the St. Croix Valley Foundation trying to network people together, I think it's an investment in social capital that is extremely important. Okay. Now, what are some specific strategies? I won't spend a whole lot of time on this for the sake of time, but different strategies. Investment in local K-12. Well, that seems obvious. Things are shifting, though, over time. It used to be that we invested in K-12 education so that we can produce labor for the workforce. We want to produce cogs for the economy. Okay? It's shifting. Increasingly, rather than people following jobs, we're finding that jobs follow people. This goes back to the placemaking stuff that you were talking about last year. Okay, we want to invest in K-12 education because we want to make this an attractive place for people that want to move. We want to make this an attractive place for a potential entrepreneur who wants to raise their family here. We want to make this because it's an investment in the culture of the community. Okay, so it's beyond just simply producing labor for the labor force. It's deeper than that. Early childhood education. As I work around Wisconsin, rural Wisconsin, childcare availability is one of the top issues, particularly post-COVID. It's a huge, huge issue. And I think your third speaker on, or is it your second speaker, fourth speaker on this series is going to be talking about that. And I think that that's extremely important because I think this, in the US, childcare has always been kind of a market-driven issue. Childcare are private businesses, and we let the market decide whether these businesses should be here or not. I think that what we're finding is what economists refer to as market failure. These businesses simply cannot function in a lot of rural communities. The economics just doesn't stack up. So I think that there needs to be more of a community approach to addressing early childhood education, daycare, if you will. I've learned working with childhood education folks don't ever call it daycare. I get yelled at if I say daycare, so I apologize for that. Ensure access to secondary educational opportunities. Make sure that the local technical schools have branches available. Make sure that the UW or University of Minnesota you have access to those types of resources. Also broadband. A lot of continuing educational opportunities is coming through broadband. I think that's where, when people when I was working with rural communities, a lot of kind of the older leadership, if you will, thought of broadband as, well, that's just a luxury. That's what you play video games on. That's YouTube, stuff like that. But then when COVID hit and all the education went remote online, I think it was a wake-up call. A lot of people now realize that, guess what? Maybe 30 years ago, the internet was a luxury, it was a novelty, but today it's necessary. You have to have it. Okay. And one of the ways is that we see that is through educational opportunities. How many times a year? My daughter does this. She's 26. and she's like, she has to fix like a taillight on her car. And she fixes it. I was like, Camille, I'm really impressed. How'd you do that? She said, I YouTubed it. Okay, something as simple as that. You know, you're using Excel, and just like, geez, how do I make it do that? Well, you YouTube it, and you watch a video and you learn how to do it. Professional development opportunities for local businesses. This is, I think, extremely important. Most businesses in most communities tend to be small. They're locally owned. They're started by local folks. Some of these folks are very good at what they do, but they don't make very good business people. My brother, for example, he does art conservation work. He's an artist. He's very good at what he does. He can't balance a checkbook for the life of him. Are there professional development opportunities for local businesses? Is the local chamber of commerce, is the local business association providing professional development opportunities? Or is the chamber of commerce simply a social club? Okay, foster boomerang migration. This is where natural amenities can come into play and quality of life can come into play. This is essentially encourage our youth, go off to college, go off, experience the bright city lights, go move to Chicago, or my daughter's case, New Orleans, experience it, but then think about coming back. Okay, and when you come back, you're going to come back with all those experiences and new ways of thinking about things. Come on back and then get involved in the community. Financial capital, insured bankers are actively involved in economic development efforts. That's why that one bank or one community in North Central Wisconsin is looking at trying to get another branch bank in. Create a local credit union. If the local banks are not playing ball, start a credit union. Community supported revolving loan funds for local businesses. A lot of local businesses are small, and the credit that they need or the financing that they need is sometimes like, hey, I need $10,000 to buy this new piece of equipment. You go to a bank and you ask for a $10,000 loan, not worth their time and effort. Okay, they're going to say no, because it's you know, add a zero to that and they might be willing to talk to you. Okay, how many times my brother ended up using Uncle Visa to make those investments? Well, you know what interest rate Uncle Visa charges? You know, so small loan fund, a network of angel investors to help local businesses tap in some of the deep pockets of folks that have the resources and might be interested in being angel investors. Network into state and federal financing programs. There is so much state and federal money out there to help local businesses. It's mind-boggling. Nobody knows about them, or if they do know about them, they don't know how to get into that area. Okay, housing assistance programs. We could talk all day about housing issues. Okay, social capital. Create networking opportunities for small business owners and those interested in starting a business. This is really vital. When you're thinking of starting a business, information is vital. Okay, formal information, stuff that you can watch, you can search on the internet and learn how to do this, learn how to put a business plan together, but also informal information, kind of that, how do you effectively work with a troublesome employee, things like that. Learning from that network of other businesses can be extremely valuable and extremely important. Okay. Encourage community engagement of social organization, including religious congregations. There are lots and lots of different institutions within a community, all the way from social clubs to business organizations to religious organizations. There's a lot of them. Are they networking? Be open and receptive to newcomers to the community. You notice I'm starting to repeat myself on some of these things. Okay. Encourage volunteerism. One of the things a problem that we've got in Wisconsin, and I think it's true in Minnesota, is that we are blessed with lots and lots and lots of local governments. Lots. From a Jeffersonian perspective, that's good because government is close to the people. The problem, though, is that we run out of people that are willing to run for public office. And the only people that end up in public office are people that are probably not the best suited for it. So encourage volunteerism is important. Encourage active participation in local government activities. This is where that partisan stuff comes into. I mean, you can really kind of, when there's a town meeting, who shows up? Well, the extremes, both ends of the extremes show up, and they start lobbing at each other, and everything just falls apart. Okay, it's really important to get kind of more, how do I say this, more reasonable people involved. Okay, cultural capital. Celebrate the history of the community. Embrace it. Okay, that doesn't mean that we're going to go back to the way the community was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, but it's something that we can celebrate and embrace. A lot of the Main Street programs, and I think that's the third speaker, is talking about Main Street. The Main Street program is really kind of came out the American Historic Trust Preservation. I think I got that right. And what it was is essentially, hey, there's a lot of history and a lot of historical culture embodied in our downtowns, and we need to preserve that. Well, the best way to do that is to have vibrant businesses in these downtowns. Okay, so kind of celebrating the history of the downtown by making it a vibrant place. Strive towards embracing diversity, consider ethnic celebrations. When you find that there's a growing Latino population and suddenly there's a couple of really good Mexican restaurants or Mexican grocery stores, celebrate it. Okay, organize cultural events such as farmers markets, arts fairs, music in the park, anything that will make the community kind of just more dynamic, a better place to live. That goes back to the placemaking. Sponsor local performing arts groups, celebrate entrepreneurial activity, and support local school clubs and activities. Okay, built capital. I won't get into capital improvement plans. I won't get into that. Invest in beautification activities, streetscaping, riverfronts. If you got a river running through your town or you got lakes, make sure that there's, that is something that people would like to walk their dogs along. Okay, this is one thing I'll go ahead and say this. I grew up in Chicago, and the one thing Chicago got right is how they managed the lakefront. They purposely decided years and years ago that the lakefront was going to be parkland. Milwaukee, not so much. Guess what Milwaukee's now doing? They're trying to turn the lakefront into more of a parks area where they can have functions, and they're actually doing quite well now. Invest in recreational activities, parks, bike walking paths, public tennis courts, an ice rink, things like that that just improve the quality of place. Encourage historic preservation. Locales, I'll skip on that one. Political capital, encourage younger residents to run for public office. One of the most effective programs that I've seen is an extension here I forget the exact name of it, but it's basically getting high school kids mentored into local government. And it's exposing high school kids to what government at the local level is like. And it's really pretty effective. Enhance the level of volunteerism, the pool of informal leaders, make regular connections and representatives from higher units of government, form multi-jurisdictional agreements to improve services. This is something that a lot of police and fire departments are doing now, is they agree to back each other up. A lot of streets departments now, you have multi-jurisdictional cooperation. One of the things we're seeing more and more on the Wisconsin side of the river from economic development is communities coming together and forming regional economic development groups. Okay, they're working together. They're realizing that the economy does not stop at the municipal boundaries. That is, they're part of a larger milieu of economic activity, and they need to work together to address those issues. Okay, use social media to better connect with local governments and local citizens. Again, just kind of a laundry list here. Natural capital, comprehensive planning. so that things like the frac sand mining gold rush came, there's a set of guidelines to help us think through. Invest in non-extractive uses, river walks, bike trails, set aside land for future development, work to ensure that extractive industries like farming, forestry, and mining do not conflict with other non-extractive uses. For example, the Menominee Nation in Wisconsin has a working forest, and that forest, they are actively harvesting that forest, but yet at the same time, there's active tourism and recreation going on in that forest. You could be camping in that forest and not even know that it's being actively harvested. They've won national awards for how they manage that forest. You can have your cake and eat it too. It's not either or. Okay, vibrant communities. It's bottom up. It involves a wide range of citizen involvement. Okay, this is where kind of the partisan bickering that's occurring in Washington and to some extent here in the Madison Capitol. If this falls down to the local level, we're gonna be gridlocked and nothing's going to happen. If anything, we're going to slide backwards. Take the long-term view and avoid looking for magic bullets. There is no magic bullet. That's why the systems thinking approach of the community capitals, I think, is very useful because it kind of points out that there is no magic bullet. Strategies can range from the complex, creating a credit union, the simplistic, hosting music in the park type of events. Okay, take a proactive approach and avoid putting out fires. And that gets to the culture of the community. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions that folks may have, or if there were any comments. And I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any comments that you'd like me to address. Was there anything that I said that you just thought was, you're wrong? Challenge me. Or if you want some clarification, please ask.
Well, first of all, Professor Deller, thank you so much for those comments. It was excellent. And there are a few questions, and I'll start with those. And Anne, thank you for posting your comment to everyone there. We'll get to that too. So first of all, questions. Are there measurements that a community can use to evaluate gaps in any of these areas of capital?
Yes, there are. And the floors have been working on this. My colleague Phil Watson has been looking at this. And if you are interested, I can give you a summary of what some of those indicators look like. I'll put my email in the chat. I kind of shut down the PowerPoint before anybody probably had a chance to do that. But yes, there are indicators. A lot of this is, I don't want to use the word common sense, but a lot of it is kind of intuition. You kind of know it when you see it. And one of the struggles that Phil's been having with his set of indicators is that there's as much art as there is science in developing these indicators. That's why we like looking at things like, economic diversity, because we can measure it. We like looking at things like tax burden, we can measure it. But when you get to things like cultural attitudes, it's really hard to measure that stuff. So this is, yes, there are attempts, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for commenting on that. Could you please also comment on resilience in the face of adverse events that are not shocks, but rather more permanent degradations of the environment and economy due to climate change, et cetera?
Oh boy. I think if we go back and you look at that graph I had of over time, then a shock and whatnot, I think that when you're talking about things like climate change, more severe weather events and things like that, I think you're talking about not just a shock and then be able to come back, but I think you're actually talking about the whole economy kind of shifting and adapting to that new level of activity. How that's going to play out, wow. I wish I knew. I think I think the key here is the ability of the community to adapt to those changes and realizing what is beyond their control and what is within their control, and worry about what is within their control. The larger climate change, that's going to shift the game, if you will. But how do we adapt to that shift? I think a lot of the things that we talked about here are still going to be important and still come into play.
Very good.
That's
Thank you.
probably not a very satisfactory answer, but it's something that we're really struggling with.
Absolutely. And this is from our friends and partners, St. Croix Valley Habitat for Humanity. She points out that housing costs have never been this extreme in Western Wisconsin. Yes. And so to get people to come here and live here and encourage workforce development, we need more affordable housing. She says she understands the economic impact of that, of fair market and above market housing opportunities, but we need lower income workers. So it's a delicate balance, yes. If there's no housing and no transportation, how do we bring people into our communities?
This is, I think this is, you're not alone with this. I mean, this is something that every community in Wisconsin that we've worked with, this is one of their top issues. I mean, there are 4 issues: labor shortage, housing, broadband, and childcare are the 4 things that get talked about again and again and again. Housing, a lot of communities in Wisconsin came to housing through labor shortages. They were asking the question, we're creating all these jobs, why are people moving in to take the jobs? Well, my first question is, what do the jobs pay? Nobody's going to move for a $10 an hour job. There's not. They're not going to move for a $15 an hour job. Okay, then we start thinking about, oh, well, maybe these aren't very good jobs. Then a lot of communities came to the realization, well, geez, they're not moving in because either housing is too expensive or it's really crappy. And how do we deal with that? How do we address that? And some communities have actually been pretty innovative in terms of how they've gone about this. Some communities continue to struggle because a lot of communities, this idea of an apartment complex where rent is less than $1,000 a month, a lot of folks are I don't want that kind of development in my community. You get a lot of NIMBYism going on. You got to get past that. Okay, you've got to realize that we need a mix of housing. One way that I've talked to some of the communities that I've dealt with housing is that, okay, suppose that your child graduated high school, does not want to go to college, and they want to move out, and they're 19, they're 20, they got a job that pays $15 an hour. Where are they going to live? And it's like, well, we need different types of housing development here. So that's an opening up to apartment complexes that are not high-end apartment complexes. I mean, you look at downtown Madison, they're building apartment buildings left and right, and they're all high-end, not that kind. So you got to be willing to do that. And then the community maybe has to be actually kind of, put a little skin in the game in terms of helping to finance this kind of stuff. Because if I'm a developer and I've got a choice between building high-end apartment buildings or high-end housing or affordable, I'm going to make a lot more money building high-end. Why should I not do that? If the community comes in and is an active partner, then they can kind of start to make the math work. The community has to be a proactive partner in this.
Okay, very good. Well, the questions are rolling in. I think we have time for a couple more. First of all, what is the most important first step to guide a community to begin authentically celebrating newcomers who look different from them?
I think the first thing is that if there's a chamber of commerce in the community or there's a business association, that they actively go out and they start actively inviting those new business owners to join. Come in. We're glad that you're here. We're pleased that you picked us as a community to live and to start a business, and we want you to become involved in our community. The second is the churches. The Latinx population tends to be more religious, which means that a foot in the door is through the churches. So having conversations with the local ministers, the local priests, and seeing how can we, as a community, work more closely. The challenge is how do you handle the folks that are basically fighting it? Okay, and my colleague has a political cartoon he uses: two guys sitting on a bus, two old guys sitting on a bus seat, and one goes, "Yeah, I've seen lots of changes in this community, and I fought every single one of them." How do you change that kind of attitude? I'm an economist. It's difficult. It's difficult. This is where I find myself reading lots and lots of sociology, a lot of political science to try to get a better understanding of how can you do something like, deal with something like that. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. I'm curious about this, and I know one of my committee members is on the call and also curious. So we actually have a grant program called the Vibrant Communities Grant Program that recently has been focused on mental health. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on health and wellness and how that fits into the many factors that you've talked about today.
It's extremely important. One of the things that we've been looking at is an angle through childcare. Is the quality of the childcare, and the way that we're thinking about it is what's referred to as presenteeism. Is that I'm at work, but I can't focus on work because I'm really uncomfortable with the situation that my children are in, or I'm at work, but I can't really focus because my health is deteriorating. Okay. That can have a very negative impact on the economy, sometimes a significant impact on the economy. You can think about it in terms of labor productivity. And it is important. So investing in health is not only a quality of life issue, but it's also a labor productivity economic growth issue. In the sense of, if you've got a lot of sick people or a lot of unhealthy people or people that are distracted because of mental health issues or distracted because of childcare issues, they're not going to be as productive. And it's going to harm the economy. So I think that kind of broad picture approach, I think, is extremely important. And I like the way that a lot of places are thinking about placemaking now, and the idea that this community capitals is that all of these things are important. There isn't one thing that's more important than another thing. And how communities are progressing in terms of their thinking that way, I'm really encouraged by. Because I can remember discussions of like, well, all we have to do is cut taxes and the economy will be fine. Like, no, it's a lot more complicated than that. Okay, so I like that idea. I think anything that can improve mental health, anything that can improve, overall health, I think is really important. There was and I know we're probably running short on time here, but there was one example out of the University of Stout. There was a Rural Manufacturers Council that was put together by the University of Stout, University of Wisconsin Stout. And one of the things they did is that they were having a manufacturers council. It was basically get together and talk about issues and share ideas. And one of them was a manufacturer in northern Wisconsin. They had about 500 employees, started a wellness program. And they were just so pleased with the results of that wellness program. They've noticed that sick time is down. They've noticed that productivity is up. And they're saying that it has a return on investment of multiple times. And I just kind of wish that manufacturer could go out and kind of, how they did it really mattered.
Very good. Well, several questions have popped in and I wish we had more time, but we don't. So I'm going to close the session by saying thank you so much, Professor Deller. And again, thank you to our partner and sponsor, First State Bank and Trust. I also want to thank our COV Planning Committee, especially our committee co-chairs, Judy Freund and Rick Bonmunder. Thank you. Thank you. Reminder, please join us for the next program. That's Wednesday, February 8th, and that will be focused on one of the things Professor Deller mentioned today, entrepreneurship with Tessa Conroy, actually, Steve's colleague from UW-Madison. So that registration will open on Monday. And I think someone put this in chat, but I wanted to let you all know, another crucial topic related to resiliency, which we talked about today, housing. If you're interested in learning more about creative approaches to address our region's housing shortages, attend Momentum West Housing Solutions Forum. That's on January 25th in Menominee. So you can email me if you need additional information. And lastly, thank you in advance for taking a few minutes to share your feedback via a brief survey, which you should receive by the end of the week. Your input's really helpful as we plan for future programming. So thanks again for being a part of the conversation today. I look forward to seeing you in February. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Bye. Wonderful.
Thank you, Professor Deller.
Bye.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oh, and I'll also say for those who are here, I'm going to post that video on our website too. So the mouth aligns with the sound. You can watch it again. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Angie, can you put that information in the link that we send out for the Menominee thing?
Absolutely. Great idea. Yep, I'll include that.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, you'll make us.
Dropping off slowly. I'll stay till the very end. Oh, hi, Chris. I see you there.